clock out time, north side of Indianapolis. A young dad named Gerald Prior sends a last text, "Be home soon," then taps Instagram to confirm a late-night meetup with a girl he's never seen off-screen. Within 3 hours, he'll be on a stretcher, dying from 4 gunshots. Before we get too deep, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you find the value in these discussions. One January night, he thinks he's heading out on a casual date with a young woman he met on Instagram. Instead, he walks into a trap, an ambush that costs him his life. This is the story of Gerald Prior, and as an investigative journalist, I have been following his case from afar with a heavy heart. Everything I'm about to share, I pieced together through official statements, court documents, and news reports, since I didn't have the opportunity to interview the family in person or witness the proceedings firsthand. What happened to Gerald is shocking and tragic. It's a story of betrayal that unfolded in the early hours of January 25th, 2025 in Indianapolis. Gerald Prior was a proud father, a son, a brother, and a friend. At 26 years old, Gerald was raising his 2-year-old daughter, a little girl affectionately named Honey. Those who knew him described Gerald as a goofball with a big heart, the life of the party who loved to make others laugh. He was confident about his appearance and carried himself with a bit of swagger. Yet he had a playful, sometimes mischievous side. His older brother Byron recalled with a laugh how Gerald could be irritating in that way only a younger sibling can be. Gerald's grandmother Linda shared fond memories of him, stopping by her house daily after work, often just to tease her and worry the daylights out of her, as she put it. He had a fearless streak and dabbled in everything from sports to dancing. In fact, family members still smile about videos of Gerald enthusiastically dancing during silly internet challenges long before TikTok made such things popular. But above all, Gerald was devoted to his little girl, Honey. On his Facebook page, he proudly filled his feed with photos of her. He was the kind of dad who would play hide and seek around the house. Gerald would be hiding just out of sight, then suddenly pop around the corner with a grin, saying, "Here I am, I'm right here," before scooping her into his arms. That was their little game. Now, imagine the pain of this family in the aftermath of January 25th, when Honey called out, "Daddy, where are you?" And there was no answer. "She did it the other day, and my heart just broke," Gerald's mother, Tamekia Wiley, recounted, describing the moment her granddaughter searched for her father, who wasn't there anymore. This is the void Gerald left behind, a void that no court verdict can ever truly fill. With this understanding of who Gerald was, let's turn to the fateful night that cut his life short. Gerald's path crossed with 19-year-old Alexis J. Hawkins on social media, specifically Instagram. It's not unusual these days. 2 young people start chatting online, maybe exchange some flirty messages, and decide to meet up. Gerald, being a young single man, was interested in Alexis and thought she was interested in him too. In the hours leading up to the meeting, Gerald and Alexis traded messages on Instagram to firm up their plans for a date. In fact, at one point Gerald messaged her, "When you free?" trying to pin down a time to get together. They decided on that night, and Gerald believed he had a casual late-night hangout lined up. From Gerald's perspective, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. According to what investigators later found in those message threads, he genuinely thought this was going to be a normal date. Perhaps they'd grab a drink, maybe sit and talk in his car, get to know each other. Gerald even checked in with his mum around 10 p.m. on January 24th, letting her know he'd be working late that night. It was a small FIB to cover the fact that he was sneaking in some social time, a decision plenty of adults might make, not wanting to advertise their dating life to their parents. What Gerald didn't know was that Alexis Hawkins had a boyfriend, an 18-year-old named Brian K. Winston Jr. And that she was allegedly hatching a plan with him behind Gerald's back. Evidence later showed that at the same time Alexis was messaging Gerald about their date, she was also in communication with Brian Winston. In those secret exchanges, as revealed by an arrest affidavit, Alexis boasted about scamming several men before. To Brian, this wasn't just a harmless meetup. It was setting the stage for a robbery. In street slang, Alexis allegedly told Brian she was about to make a play, a term investigators interpret as pulling off a scheme or score. In other words, Gerald was being set up. It's important to note how meticulously this trap appears to have been planned. Alexis and Brian were in constant contact, and police say they even have digital evidence of Alexis coordinating with Brian about the robbery plan via Instagram messages. The betrayal here is profound. Gerald thought Alexis was interested in him, while in reality, she might have been sizing him up as a target all along. As a journalist reading these details in court documents later, I felt a chill. The idea that someone could pretend to flirt and date, all the while plotting to lure a person to be robbed, it's a level of deception that's truly disturbing. And tragically, that deception would soon turn deadly. The evening of January 24, 2025 began ordinarily enough for Gerald. He was at work that day on the assembly line at Carrier Corporation, a job he was grateful for. Sometime after finishing his shift, around 8 p.m, he swung by his grandmother Linda's house on his dinner break, as he often did, to say hello and see his daughter Honey, who was staying with Grandma for the night. This would be the last time his family saw him alive. Before leaving, Gerald gave Honey a kiss and lightly told her he'd see her the next day. He then headed back out, presumably telling family he had to get back to work. By 10 p.m, Gerald was in touch with his mother, Tamekia, again. He told her he was working overtime and would be home late. In reality, Gerald was preparing to meet Alexis Hawkins for their late-night rendezvous. We don't know exactly what was going through Gerald's mind. Maybe he was excited, maybe a little nervous. But from all accounts, he had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. Sometime before midnight, Gerald and Alexis finally met up in person. It's likely Gerald picked Alexis up in his car. Given that Alexis didn't have her own vehicle there, she later had to ask others for a ride. Investigators would later obtain surveillance video that captured a glimpse of their date. That video footage showed Gerald and Alexis together inside his car outside a liquor store about an hour before the shooting. This suggests that around 12:15 a.m. or so on January 25th, the two stopped at a liquor store on the north side of Indianapolis, perhaps to buy drinks or snacks, or maybe just as a place to meet up initially. The specific location mentioned in reports is near 49th Street and Primrose Avenue, not far from the Indiana State Fairgrounds. It appears they lingered in that area for a while, possibly talking or drinking in the car, completely unaware of the danger that was looming. Shortly after 1 a.m. on January 25th, 2025, that danger struck. Sometime around 1:15 a.m, the quiet of the night was shattered by gunfire on the 4900 block of East 49th Street. Gerald Prior, sitting in his parked car with Alexis, was ambushed. According to police, Brian Winston Jr. suddenly appeared at the scene and opened fire on Gerald. Multiple shots rang out, and Gerald was struck by bullets. The reports don't indicate that Gerald had any time to react or defend himself. This was a sneak attack by design, a planned ambush. In the chaos, Alexis Hawkins was miraculously unharmed. Police later noted that her survival seemed almost intentional, as if the gunman, her boyfriend Brian, took care not to hit her. Gerald, however, was gravely wounded. Neighbors who heard the gunshots must have called 911 because Indianapolis Metropolitan Police officers rushed to the scene shortly after. They found a harrowing sight. Gerald Prior lying on the ground next to his vehicle, bleeding and unresponsive. It was evident he'd been shot multiple times. Alexis was right there too, presumably putting on the act of a panicked date who'd just witnessed an attack. First responders worked frantically to save Gerald's life. He was still alive when they arrived, so they quickly got him into an ambulance and raced to a nearby hospital. One can only imagine the confusion and terror Gerald might have felt in his final conscious moments, ambushed out of nowhere, likely realizing in his last breaths that this date had set him up. Despite doctors' efforts, Gerald Prior was pronounced dead at the hospital from his injuries. Back at home, his family had no idea what had happened. They just knew Gerald hadn't come home. When Gerald didn't return home by the WE hours, his mother Tamekia grew worried. She tried calling his phone repeatedly after midnight, but her calls went straight to voicemail, and her texts went unanswered. This was very unlike Gerald, who was normally responsive. Tamekia's motherly intuition told her something was wrong. As the night turned to dawn, the awful confirmation came. At 5:02 a.m, Gerald's stepfather, Travis Wiley, received a phone call. On the line was a representative from the coroner's office. Travis heard the words, "No parent ever wants to hear. We regretfully have to tell you that Gerald just lost his life." Travis was in disbelief, even anger. He initially thought it had to be a cruel scam call. but a quick Google search of the number confirmed it was indeed the Marion County coroner. Travis immediately called Temecula, who was at a relative's house with a little honey. "Tell me Gerald is at home," he pleaded, hoping against hope that this was all a mistake. But Gerald was not at home. In that moment, the family's worst nightmare became reality. Gerald was gone, the victim of a senseless shooting that they would soon learn was a premeditated setup. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, IMPD, launched an investigation into Gerald's murder immediately. At first, it might have looked like a robbery gone wrong, or perhaps a mysterious drive-by. But investigators had a critical lead from the start: Alexis Hawkins, the woman who was with Gerald when he was shot. Initially, one might think she too was a victim. After all, she was on the date and could have easily been hurt. Alexis portrayed herself as an innocent witness. The police weren't buying it for long. There were subtle clues that all was not what it seemed. Very quickly, detectives turned to Gerald's cell phone. Often, a victim's phone can hold vital information about their last communications and plans. Gerald's phone was recovered at the scene. Likely, it was in his car or on his person when he was attacked. When investigators examined his Instagram messages, the whole scheme began to unravel. They found the conversation between Gerald and Alexis arranging that night's get-together. Crucially, they also discovered evidence, possibly from data obtained via a search warrant on Alexis's Instagram account, that Alexis had been communicating with Brian Winston Jetta in parallel. These communications painted a damning picture. Alexis and Brian seemed to be conspiring to rob Gerald all along. Investigators obtained an arrest affidavit for Alexis, and in it, details of these Instagram chats were laid out. Alexis bragged to Brian about scamming other men and indicated that Gerald would be another target. Gerald's messages to her, like asking, "What's the plan for tonight?" were innocent. He had no idea he was being led on. But Alexis's messages to Brian were all about the robbery plot, discussing the play, their code word for the scheme, and essentially setting up Gerald to be at the right place for Brian to ambush. This digital evidence was a goldmine for the police. It clearly suggested premeditation. Gerald wasn't killed in a random robbery. He was lured. Apart from the messages, detectives uncovered other pieces of the puzzle. They traced Alexis's online activity around the time of the murder. It turned out that on the very day of the shooting, Alexis had been Googling news about local shootings. She searched for terms like "news today near me" and "shootings Keystone," likely trying to see if the crime had hit the news cycle yet. This is not something an innocent person typically does in the immediate aftermath of a shooting, but it is something you might expect from someone who is checking if their crime is making headlines. Furthermore, records show that shortly after Gerald was shot, Alexis was sending messages to several people asking for a ride away from the area. Think about that. If she were just a terrified victim, wouldn't she stick around and talk to the police? Instead, it appears she wanted to flee the scene quickly. Investigators found those requests for a pickup near the crime location, which heavily implied consciousness of guilt. Alexis seemed to know more than she let on when officers first responded. And what did Alexis say when police questioned her? IMPD brought Alexis in for an interview on February 6th, 2025, roughly 2 weeks after Gerald's death. By this time, they likely had the Instagram records and was zeroing in on her. Initially, Alexis claimed she couldn't remember that night. It's a common refrain, suddenly having a lapse in memory when pressed about a crime. She denied having any role in the shooting. In fact, she was very particular in her denials. "No weapon to say I did anything. My fingerprints aren't on anything," she told the detectives. That statement is chilling in its own way. It's as if she was trying to distance herself from the physical act. "I didn't shoot a gun, you can't tie me to the weapon." Yet she didn't outright deny being present. It's a defensive kind of answer, one that likely raised red flags for investigators. Detectives asked Alexis a pointed question. Would her fingerprints be found in Gerald's car? Alexis replied, "It's not going to be on no weapon though." This evasive answer suggested that yes, she might have been in his car, which of course she was. But she's emphasizing that her prints wouldn't be on the gun. When the questioning turned to one of her incriminating messages, the one about making a play, Alexis chose to stop the interview and ask for a lawyer. At that moment, the interrogation ended, and it was clear to police that Alexis was not just a witness. She was a suspect. The investigation by then had ample probable cause to make an arrest. They had digital evidence of the plan, the odd behaviour of Alexis after the fact, and her less than credible interview. On February 26, 2025, Alexis Hawkins was arrested and formally charged for her role in Gerald's killing. This was 1 month and a day after Gerald's death. Police charged her initially with murder and attempted robbery, among other counts, reflecting the allegation that this was a robbery plot that turned fatal. However, the case was far from over. The alleged shooter, Brian Winston Jr., was still on the loose. Gerald's family and the public now knew that a second suspect was involved, and the manhunt for Brian was underway. Tips and leads suggested Brian had fled Indianapolis. For weeks, authorities worked to track him down. Finally, a breakthrough. Investigators learned Brian Winston Jr. had traveled over 1,000 miles away to Austin, Texas. Acting on this information, law enforcement in Texas apprehended Brian. On April 2nd, 2025, Brian Winston Jr. was arrested in Austin. He did not get far enough to escape justice. Shortly after, he was extradited back to Indiana to join Alexis in facing the music. With both suspects in custody by early April, the IMPD announced that the pieces of this puzzle had come together. They publicly confirmed that Gerald's killing was indeed the result of a plotted robbery scheme. The crime that had initially bewildered Gerald's family. Why would anyone target this young father? Now had a narrative. Gerald was lured on a fake date, set up by Alexis, and murdered by her accomplice boyfriend, Brian. It was a tale almost too awful to believe, except there it was in black and white, in the affidavits and messages. Both were held without bond, given the severity of their charges. Prosecutors now had to decide how exactly to charge this duo for Gerald's death. Indiana law allows multiple charges in homicide cases, and this case was no exception. Ultimately, each suspect was indicted on a slate of serious charges for the events of January 25th. For Alexis Hawkins, the alleged honey trap who set the plan in motion, prosecutors charged her with murder, conspiracy to commit robbery, and attempted robbery. These charges reflect that she is accused of both participating in the killing and in the underlying plan to rob Gerald. Essentially, even if she didn't pull the trigger, she can be fully culpable for the murder because it happened during the commission of a felony, attempted robbery, that she allegedly helped plan. That's where the felony murder rule comes in. The key point is, Alexis is facing a potential decades-long or even life sentence if convicted on these charges. For Brian Winston Jr., the accused gunman, the charges were even heavier. He faces 2 counts of murder. One, likely the standard murder charge, and another possibly felony murder for killing someone during a robbery. Additionally, like Alexis, he's charged with conspiracy to commit robbery and attempted robbery. The duplication of murder charges is a prosecutorial strategy to cover different legal theories of the crime. It doesn't mean he killed 2 people. It means the state can argue intentional murder and felony murder, letting a jury decide under which theory to convict, or both. By mid-April 2025, these charges were filed in Marion County Court, and both suspects were in the early stages of the legal process. Alexis Hawkins had her initial court hearing in March 2025, shortly after her arrest. At that hearing, the court formally informed her of the charges and addressed her custody status. She was denied bond, given the murder charge, which is standard in such cases. It appears she did not enter a plea at that first appearance, or if she did, it was not publicly noted. Sometimes defendants will plead not guilty at arraignment as a formality, even if they later change it. Brian Winston Jr., after being extradited, had his first Indiana court appearance on April 15th, 2025. This would similarly have been an initial hearing, arraignment for him. During that hearing, the judge read him his charges. Like Alexis, Brian was ordered held without bond at the Marion County Jail, which is no surprise for a murder case. The court then set a date for the next step in the proceedings. Both Brian and Alexis were scheduled to appear again on May 19th, 2025. This date likely corresponds to a preliminary hearing or a status conference. By May, the prosecution and defense would discuss how to proceed, whether there will be a trial date set, or if the case will go to a grand jury, etc. In Indiana, defendants can waive a formal preliminary hearing if they've been indicted or if probable cause is already clear from the charging documents. In any event, May 19th was the key upcoming court date, that both the accused and Gerald's family had circled on their calendars. As for legal representation, by April it was reported that Alexis Hawkins had an attorney of record, though the name wasn't widely publicized. That attorney presumably would be either a public defender or a private lawyer hired by her family. It's important to underline that as of April 2025, neither Alexis nor Brian has been convicted of these crimes. In the eyes of the law, they are presumed innocent until proven guilty in court. They have only been charged based on probable cause. Plea entries for both were not yet recorded in online court systems by mid-April. Typically, in such cases, it's expected they will plead not guilty to all charges, forcing the state to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. Whether they maintain that stance or consider a plea bargain down the line remains to be seen. As of now, there's no indication either suspect has confessed or agreed to any plea deal. They're likely awaiting trial, which could be many months away given how the justice system works. While the legal proceedings inch forward, Gerald Prior's family is left to grapple with an unimaginable loss. In the immediate aftermath of Gerald's death, his loved ones were in a state of shock. Not only had they lost Gerald, but it soon became public that his death was the result of a cold-blooded setup. For a family that knew Gerald as a kind, outgoing young man who stayed out of trouble and worked hard for his daughter, it was almost unfathomable that someone would target him in this way. Gerald's mother, Tamekia Wiley, has been the voice of the family in many press accounts. Tamekia gave an emotional interview to Fox 59 News, a local Indianapolis station, that was later quoted widely. "I'm broken inside, I'm torn, I'm tore up," she said, describing her emotional state.
Never done this. They took my heart. It was my baby.
The rawness of her pain is evident in her words. This wasn't just the usual platitude of a grieving mother, it was a guttural expression of heartbreak. Tamekia also spoke about justice. "I mean, no justice will ever cure my broken heart. It will not ever bring my baby back," she told reporters, emphasizing that no matter what happens to Alexis and Brian in court, it won't reverse the tragedy that befell Gerald. She's right. Even if both suspects are convicted on all counts and punished to the fullest extent, Gerald is still gone. A mother's heart has a hole that can't be filled. Tamekia's focus now is on honoring her son's memory and caring for the granddaughter he left in her care. Gerald's stepfather, Travis Wiley, also shared his perspective. To him, as to the rest of the family, this crime was senseless and cruel beyond measure.
He lost his life for going on a date. It was a senseless act, and they didn't get nothing out of it. And they took everything from us. You can't escape this type of pain. You can't. There's no running from it. There's no getting away.
Conveying that the family's loss outweighs any satisfaction punishment might bring. Travis has also tried to push back against any negative stereotypes or narratives that sometimes follow a tragedy like this. He pointed out that when a young black man is killed, people often assume he must have been involved in dangerous dealings, but that was not the case with Gerald. Gerald wasn't in a gang, wasn't running the streets. He was a working dad coming off a shift, thinking about a date. Travis passionately stated he doesn't want Gerald to be written off as just another statistic. He wants people to know Gerald was loved, cherished, and innocent in this situation. Other family members have shared touching memories as well. Gerald's grandmother, Linda, tearfully called him "my baby boy" and lamented how he used to drop by to brighten her day, a routine forever broken now. Each story paints a picture of a vibrant young man whose absence is felt every minute. And then there's Honey, Gerald's daughter. She turned 3 years old on March 5th, 2025, roughly 6 weeks after her father's death. The family tried to give her a happy birthday, even as they themselves were grieving. They threw a party and celebrated Honey's milestone. But Gerald's absence loomed large. Photos from that day, according to relatives, show Honey smiling with cake and balloons, surrounded by family who love her. Yet everyone knew one person was heartbreakingly missing. Honey's too young to understand death. She just knows her daddy isn't there. Tamekia shared that Honey continues to call out for her father, doing the little "Daddy, where are you?" routine that used to end with Gerald's warm embrace. Now, when Honey calls, the adults can only fight back tears. How do you explain to a 2-year-old or 3-year-old that her father is never coming home? Throughout this, Gerald's family has been cooperative with law enforcement and the media, wanting the full truth to come out. They've been brave in sharing Gerald's story, hoping that it serves as both a cautionary tale about the dangers lurking online and a reminder of Jarrell's life, not just his death. Sometimes young criminals in a case like this are also influenced by thrill-seeking or peer pressure. Perhaps Brian wanted to prove something, or Alexis wanted to impress Brian by showing she could lure a guy. Those aspects delve into psychology, which might or might not come out in court. As of now, it appears greed was the primary motive, a plan to get money or valuables that turned into murder. For the public following the case, Gerald's story has struck a chord. Many see reflections of their own lives. Who hasn't chatted with someone online or gone on a date hoping it goes well? The betrayal here feels personal to a lot of people, and there's a strong desire to see justice served. The case has been covered in national media, People Magazine, Law and Crime, The Root, etc., as well as local Indiana outlets, which means it's getting attention. Sometimes, high tension can pressure both sides. Prosecutors know they must be thorough and fair, and defense attorneys know any misstep is magnified. The judge will certainly want to keep proceedings orderly and timely to avoid any perception of dragging feet. In the coming months, we expect to see court motions and perhaps a trial date set. If it goes to trial, it could be later in 2025 or even 2026, depending on how congested the court docket is and whether the defense asks for more time to prepare. Given the seriousness, they likely will. From my vantage point, as someone who has monitored this case through media and official reports, I will continue to watch what happens after May 19th. Will Alexis or Brian change course and decide to cooperate with authorities against the other? Will there be any sign of remorse? So far, neither has made any public statements. No apologies, no proclamations of innocence beyond the legal not guilty stance. In closing, the story of Gerald Prior's tragic death is one that underscores both the darkness that can lurk behind a friendly face online and the resilience of a family in mourning. Whatever comes, we know one thing for sure. A young father named Gerald Prior went on a date expecting romance and instead met a cruel fate. And now it's on all of us, investigators, journalists, the public, to ensure his story is told and justice is pursued. Thank you for listening, and please keep Gerald's family, especially little Honey, in your thoughts as they navigate the long road ahead. I hope this story helps you recognize warning signs and encourage you to seek help or offer support before it's too late. I'll see you in the next episode of Crime of Passion. Thank you for watching.